Welcome to It's Meaningless. This is the podcast for startup entrepreneurs who are tired of stuck and are ready to face the brutal truth. Here we uncover the meaningless daily habits to keep you from protecting and growing in life and in business. And today, so I had a just actually this morning on the way to my office. I had a little thing in traffic. So, I mean, of course, like the four-way stop sign things. Like every time you come up to one of those, it's pretty much, excuse me, pretty much a negotiation that has to take place of who goes when and who goes at what point. Like if there's nobody there, or maybe there's like one other car, it's not that big of a deal. But like if all of the sides are full, then yeah, that becomes a bigger debacle. Especially because people don't know the rules. Which actually, I'm gonna take a little bitty second to do. I guess you can think of this as like a PSA in terms of like what the rules are for negotiation. What the rules are for negotiating the four-way stop sign. And I'll do that in a bit here, but because effectively it does very much tie into like right away in general. Like if you think about it, like all of life is like, I'm not saying it's all that life is, but all of life that we do, like all throughout life, like it's a series of negotiations. Yeah, a series of negotiations. So effectively, the way that we, to the extent that we do those well, like we wind up getting good results on the back end. To the extent that we don't, like we wind up like getting in little pits. We wind up missing out, suffering in areas that kind of like, okay, what's going on? When it comes down to a lot of the times, like how did we negotiate that last transaction? And I'm not talking about like most of the time we think of negotiation, we think of some, I don't know, corporate sitting at the table, a sales call, or some new big deal that we're supposed to be doing in business or whatever. And like those are negotiations, but you can think of those as the bigger ones. While like we have ones every day, like multiple times a day. Which like if you really sat down and thought about it, like the small ones are great practice for like how you handle the big ones. So in other words, the four-way stop sign is really good practice for what you do, how you like what the result is when you get to the big ones. So anyway, like I said, this morning at a four-way stop sign, and this time, like I think it was just me. Yeah, it was just my car, and then another car to my left or to my right. Um, and okay, I was coming up to the stop sign. Other cars coming up to the stop sign. They're pretty much there. And so I came up after them. But there was a lady walking across the intersection in front of them. So I came up, stopped, kind of waited a little bit, and then realized that they were going to be there for a little bit longer. So I started trying to make the turn I was going to make. And so, in other words, they were going to be there longer waiting on the lady to finish crossing the street. And so as I started easing up to make my turn, I see them out of the corner of my eye easing up. So I stop. So I'm like, oh, maybe I misjudged that that lady was kind of crossed already. But it was kind of like effectively, like they were kind of easing up. Well, in other words, I looked over eventually and she had not. She was still like, she was almost like right in front of their car. And so I'm like, okay. Not that it really means anything, but in other words, like, you know how traffic things go. Um, um, the little, I don't know, the little tactics people use. And I can't talk too much because, like, I have been guilty, and very much so, of using those same tactics. Um, well, not necessarily this one. This one's a little petty, but of other ones. Um, Not so much, not as much these days, but I have been. Um, but anyway, the the only thing I could think of, which I mean, in other words, it could have been nothing, but realistically, it probably was um, that technically they knew they had the right of way, technically, um, and so they're kind of easing up to state their intentions to go. Which I mean, by me, that's fine. I had no problem with that. Um, the thing I think that made me think about it more is the fact of effectively what was the result? What was the result in the end? So they ease up, I guess, to, like I said, I could be completely wrong on this, but probably not. They ease up, um, apparently to try to like indicate that it's their turn. But the lady hasn't finished crossing the intersection yet, so like, why not just let me go? Um, so um, I stop, and I'm at that point. I'm like, okay, well, she's almost finished crossing. Let me just wait. I'll wait and let them go ahead. But at that point, like, because I had tried to go, by the time she does finish crossing the intersection, they're looking at me trying to figure out if I'm gonna go still or not. So I'm waving them over, just come on, come on. Uh, and so that whole thing took about another 3 seconds um, for them to get the message that, okay, look, I'm just gonna wait. Like, if it was that important to you, like, I'm just gonna wait. Uh, so like ultimately, it's like the reason that that stuck with me is because like that was a very minor incident. Like nothing really of super consequence happened as a result. However, there are some things that I think are a really good picture of what happens with us in a lot of the negotiations that we make. And again, I'm talking about negotiations in the sense of um, like just the daily things that like we have to work through. And of course, it's always with people. It's always with people. Like of course, like you can. It's pretty much always with people. Um, the the thing that happened there, that one of the things that I guess stuck out to me like I said, the end result was the fact that that extra 3 seconds, um, in other words, had they just let me go ahead and go. By the time that lady had finished crossing the intersection, um, I would have already been out of their way. I would have already been out of their way, and they would have been able to go ahead and keep moving forward, um, without having to try to negotiate like who was in the intersection or whatever, or who else was ready to turn or whatever in the intersection. Um, so I guess I've seen that a couple of times. Well, not a couple of times, a lot of times, uh, both in my own life and in other situations where, and especially at especially at traffic intersections, where like we can be so set on like making sure things go a certain way. In this instance, making sure things go the way that they should, um, that we wind up not getting the result that we really wanted in the end. Because I mean, obviously, with this, and of course, we're not really talking about traffic, but we're still using it as an example. But um, in this intersection, or in this instance, in this scenario, um, at the end of the day, like the only reason for doing any of that stuff is I want to get where I'm going. Hopefully that's the first. Hopefully that's the first motivation. I want to get where I'm going, uh, and then I want to get where I'm going faster. Um, so um, one of the things that I guess we kind of don't pick up on a lot of times, like people talk about like being logical and using reason and uh, I don't know. Everybody, no. Let's put it like this: most people consider themselves to be very logical. Most of us do. But then we miss out on like the illogical things that we do. Like, and everybody does them. Like, not necessarily everybody does the same ones, but everybody does like illogical things almost all the time. I can at least say multiple times a day. Um, the um, hmm, yeah, everybody does illogical things multiple times a day. It's just humans. Part of it is, and I've had to let this sink in with me over the last few years, several years, 4, 5, 7, some whatever. Um, is the statement that um, we are like we come to conclusions emotionally, like we as human beings come to conclusions emotionally to which we derive or gather facts to support. Um, and I'll have to say for myself, like I used to believe uh, very much in contrast to that statement. But at this point, like it took me a while, but I had to come to the conclusion that even for me, um, yeah, our our decisions really are like we are emotional beings. Um, Like if you for just a small bit of proof, it's like how much time do we spend indirectly in line with this conversation? Like how much time do we spend trying to prove to other people that we're right? Like in random conversations. I was in a conversation with a guy some years ago. Anyway, we were having this discussion, and it's like the topic was a little random. I forgot what we were talking about. Anyway, I'm sure I've had multiple conversations like that since, but the topic was a little random. The point being though is like neither of us were like super experts in the on the topic of conversation. And so it's like he's he's presenting all these arguments, and I did not say facts, but arguments. These arguments in his mind as to why things were this way or that way or not. And it's like how much um it's like at the end of the day, how much am I willing to like how far am I willing to go in terms of push that my view of this is right when I'm not even an expert. Like no one no one gave me any inside information on this topic. I haven't done like research and like I don't know. I'm hitting a lot of nerves for me, I guess today. But I'll say this on the research thing. Um, Research used to be something different than what a lot of people call research these days. Research used to mean like you take a trip to the library, um, you get a bunch of books, like not just five, like you get a bunch of books. You go through each one of them, you find out which ones say what, and you compare all of the information, and yeah, and then at the end of the day, you come to a conclusion. Um, these days, unfortunately, somehow we think research is a 5 minute or less search on Google for whatever, and then we're an expert. And yeah, let's just say that's not research. In other words, it is not enough. First of all, it's just not enough time to be acquainted with something that, yeah, to be acquainted with something that goes probably significantly deeper than what you could probably see on the surface. In other words, as far as being like in business, being a business owner, one of the things that I've realized is like not only in my own craft, but since I consult with other businesses and other industries, like it really doesn't matter what industry you're talking about. Like you could be talking about toothpick making, and while you might think that's a fairly simple process, like there are, I'm sure you could go extremely deep into what it takes to make a toothpick and what it takes to make a toothpick well. Um, because that's kind of the thing about experts. Um, Experts go deep. Um, which actually, so my, for example, my pastor at church, I like he's well known. Um, he's yeah, well known among other pastors. Um, well known as an entrepreneur. And one thing I just never realized is he has a really um really I guess really remarkable way of taking like really complex topics and making them super simple. I mean, like super simple, like anybody can get it. Um, and it never occurred to me like what it took him to do that. And this is somebody he's been doing this for uh 40 years. And it never occurred to me like what it took him to do that until one day he said like it takes him like 25 like on every like 1 hour message that he gives. um it takes about 25 hours of prep plus of prep time. And I'm like, most pastors, most speakers in any arena do not spend that much time on their talks. They just don't. um in terms of preparing, they just don't. um and the thing I've come to realize, especially like having to be an expert in my own field, um, the thing I've come to realize is in order to be number one, in order to be the best, um, that's number one. Um, but two is that I guess it kind of goes back to that rule of um, the 80/20 rule. And then when you get past that to the 90/10 rule, and then the 99/1 rule, um, in terms of how much it takes to get that last 1% of which I don't know that anybody makes it all the way, but at the same time, to be the best, you got to be somewhere in there. Um, it takes a lot more time. In other words, you can make it to 80%. You can probably a lot of people can sell to 80%. And for some people, that's fine. That's in other words, that's good. They look good. They make money. They do whatever. Um, but um, if you're looking for mastery, um, in other words, if you're looking to be the best of the best in your field, and I've said the last time, like I don't see the purpose in terms of being in entrepreneurship. I don't see the purpose of this is me, but I don't see the purpose of being in an industry, being in in a in a business that um you're not you have no intentions of being the best. Um and like I said, like you don't this is not about being it's not about being the biggest. It's about being the best, which if you pick your market, your segment of the market that you can deliver to better than anybody else, like you're the best in that segment. But yeah, there are just so many ways that you can deliver, so many ways that you can provide value um, to some segment that is pretty much being overlooked. So yeah. Anyway, that's my view on that. But anyway, back to I jumped a little bit, but back to right of way. Um, the um, four-way. Oh, um, so a couple pits I want to talk about, because in other words, this whole thing of right of way. We talked about how you can um, effectively, by kind of demanding that things go the way you specifically envision them going or want them to go or think they should go, you can miss out by effectively wasting time, wasting resources. Because in business, that same scenario of being at that four-way stop sign translates into when things don't go, when I try to force other people to do things the way I want them to do it. If, for instance, sales, if I try to push the prospect to go ahead and buy now, I might still keep that, that may still continue to be an ongoing conversation, but it may push them to the point of where they kind of back off a little bit. In other words, to where a sale that would have happened, I don't know, 20 days from now could take another 4 or 5 months. So that's kind of like one of those things of like how this kind of translates over into business. But effectively, I see this whole conversation of right of way like a road. So a road is kind of narrow, and on either side, there's a ditch. On this side, you got the ditch of, hey, I can waste time. On the other side, you got the ditch of, I can lose a relationship, losing an opportunity altogether. Because effectively, one way, in other words, we can miss out on right of way is effectively we push, which a lot of times we do. The other end of that is sometimes we don't exert or speak up loud enough. And I don't know, these days we talk well, but I still think everybody has times where they can be guilty of both. Probably maybe not one as frequently as the other, but I think we all have times where we can be guilty of both, where we either push too hard, or we don't speak loud enough. And because ultimately, like what we what the rarity seems to be for most people, what the rarity seems to be is like getting it right on the road. Um, so yeah. So like I said, the whole purpose of this podcast is really to help us go. Hey, morning. Nice. Effectively, is to help us go through. Um, Purpose of this help us go through. What is it? I lost my train of thought a little bit. Oh, of course. Um, Help us to navigate through like the things that are kind of we see as the things that keep us like from growing, from going to the next step, going to the next level. But that's all I got for you guys today. Take care. Peace out. Morning.